Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are
Uh,
the FAIRtax Guys. And
uh,
real quickly, let me toss this out real quickly that if you missed last week's program, I would strongly suggest you go back into our YouTube archive or our Rumble archive and check out last week's program with John Gaber. He demonstrated a really cool little tool that every fair tax volunteer ought to have on their phone. That you can calculate what anybody's fair tax liability is going to be in just a matter of a few seconds. It's pretty cool.
it's actually a really good device. I mean, if you wanted to drive yourself through it, you could, but it's also something that volunteers can use to get the word out about the fair tax and how it works and how simple it is. And I think that's the biggest thing is making sure that the people that you're talking to fully understand. And John's information that's available on the show is worth a look. That was it.
All right.
Today.
First order of business.
Yeah.
Crack open my can of cheer wine. We are good to go.
You didn't do the cheer wine on that.
Nope, I didn't have any last week, but I got some this week, and now we are going to do something else that we didn't do last week either. That is dig into a quick look at Congress.gov. It's been fairly slow here for a past little while as campaign season has gone into full swing, and Congress has not been in session all that much. But there are a couple of little goodies here this time on our Congress.gov segment. Again, if you put the words Internal Revenue Code in quotes at the top of the search bar at Congress.gov, select only legislation in the current 118th Congress, and hit the go. As of the day we're recording this, you get 1,962 hits. Now, 1962, that was a pretty good year for music, but it has nothing to do with the fair tax. 1,962 hits on that one. And at the top of the list is to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide for school infrastructure finance and innovation tax credit bonds. Do I need to run that by you again? School infrastructure finance and innovation tax credit bonds. Now, I've heard a lot of tax credits. I've never heard tax credit bonds before.
Neither have I. Anything to help the schools out. We pay a lot of our property taxes is allocated for public schools.
All righty.
And it has been for a long time.
Okay, number 2 on the list today, S5120, the bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide tax incentives for the establishment of grocery stores in certain underserved areas. Underserved, not undeserved, underserved areas.
Right.
That's S2120. So they're going to provide tax incentives. If you open up a grocery store in an underserved area, you can get some kind of tax incentive. It doesn't have any text in it, so it doesn't. I can't see exactly what it was. That comes from Senator Ossoff of Georgia. And then S5107 is a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish a carbon fee to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and for other purposes. That, of course, is Dick Durbin from Illinois. Don't you just love how they use the tax code to accomplish political purposes?
And it's probably not as, I don't want to use the word nefarious. It's not as critical as you think in terms of whether the balance is correct on getting the work done, to getting the bill pushed through. But it's just a place where Congress can park certain initiatives that show up that their constituents or that their lobbyists, et cetera, are looking for.
All right, one more. This one caught my eye, and you can see why here in just a second. This is H.R. 9522, and there's a companion bill in the Senate, S5008, that both say the same things. To amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to modify the railroad track maintenance credit. I didn't know there was such thing as a railroad track maintenance credit, but me being a bit of a rail fan, interested in anything railroading, that one caught my eye. That's Senator Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania on the House side to modify the railroad track maintenance credit.
I think the
Oh,
challenges in certain industries, like rail service, where that infrastructure is critical to safety, uh, especially if it's high speed rail
oh yeah.
or track, et cetera, that would be an important function, is to have there be some sort of incentive. But why? I mean, let's just why use the tax code? Let's go ahead and get more money into the coffers of the business industry, or into the individual, the worker, you and me, to put the money in our pocket. Let us pay for a lot of that without having to go through the government to, after they step on it a few times and take out what they need, and then we get a little bit less.
Well, could be. Well, that's our weekly look at Congress.gov here on Fairtax Power Radio. We want to move along a little bit. You came up with something a little while ago that I thought was just fascinating. We have talked about it before here on the program, and that is the problem. One of the main problems with an income tax is defining what is income. There are
Yeah.
so many things, and we look on Congress.gov week after week after week after week, and over the course of all the time we've been doing that, we have run across literally hundreds of bills where Congress is trying to add an exemption, take away an exemption, modify an exemption, or some income counts and some income doesn't count. We've seen those dealing with money from certain settlements or judgments. We've seen they wanted to mess with the taxability of Social Security benefits. Of course, Donald Trump came out with his first, that no tax on tips. Kamala Harris has glommed onto that, and both of them are trying to say no tax on tips. Certain debt forgiveness is not covered. Certain income from certain people, that firefighters or law enforcement or first responders or teachers would get a break. Income from certain kinds of investments is treated differently. Expenses for certain home improvements and stuff. There is just so much junk in the tax code defining what is taxable, what is not taxable, what's partially taxable, and what's double taxable. Sometimes they'll do that as well. But just defining what is income is insane. And so that's what we're going to try to dig on here a little bit, especially as it relates to the current election cycle.
Yes, and if you go to your favorite search engine and type in Trump tax cut promises 2024, you will get, I mean, everybody is talking. And this might be part of the strategy, is that the nation is, we're always, under the microscope of the Internal Revenue Service. But now here we are in the political season with conversations about taxation. I'll pick a couple of headlines. We'll start out with the American Prospect. Trump's tax cut-a-rama total so far, this was 5 hours ago at the time of our recording, $9.75 trillion. I don't know how they come up with a number on that, but that's what this particular writer is using as their headline. NBC News says Trump's tax reversal punctuates a flurry of freebies defining the 2024 election. We do know that the act that went into effect in 2017 is going to expire next year. That means that everybody's taxes across the board will go up unless it's extended somehow. So here we have the two presidential candidates, and they're not so much out there battling and trying to one-up each other. But here we go. Tax on tips taken away, overtime taken away, other taxes removed. What do you think is, the best way to go about it? Taxfoundation.org has a report that was issued on September 10th by Erica York, that even though Donald Trump says in the article that even though former President Donald Trump has not released a fully detailed tax plan as part of his current bid for re-election, he's floated several tax policy ideas. And I will say right now that wouldn't it be easier just to get rid of all of them and send the money back to the person that's earning the money in the form of no taxes taken out? Of course, he seeks to extend the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that we talked about that's expiring next year. He's talking about further reducing the corporate income tax rate in some form. And he's also discussed replacing the individual income tax with tariffs. But how do you do that and keep it as simple as the fair tax would be?
Well, you don't. But what strikes me in all of this analysis is the idea or the seemingly underlying principle that your money actually belongs to the government. And if this idea and that idea is going to cost the government so much money, well, it's our money. It's not the government's money to begin with.
Right.
And so, and again, the biggest beauty of the fair tax, beyond its sheer simplicity, is the fact that the fair tax recognizes that our money is our money. And we get to keep every penny that we earn, every penny of income from whatever source it would be, investments or working, or if you get a gift or whatever. But every penny you get is yours. You get to keep it until you decide to spend it. And it's not cost. If I decide to buy a used car instead of a new car and not pay the fair tax, I don't want somebody to say to me, that's costing the government X number of dollars because you didn't pay any tax. But that's crazy. Our money is our money. And the fair tax is the only tax system that I've ever heard anything about that recognizes that fact and works from that principle.
Right. And we talked about overtime, and we talked about, and I'm just not sure. In other words, Trump promises to end taxation of overtime pay. Your overtime hours will be tax-free. I don't see what the catalyst would be, because most people get worn out after 40 hours. I
wouldn't know about that. I've been retired for a dozen years,
Oh,
so.
yeah, but there's some of us that are still working. Well, anyway, yeah, of course. Trump has promised to end taxation of Social Security benefits, which focuses on the retirees, tips for service workers, and all like that. And we go into this conversation about eliminating taxes that we talk about, and how what is a tax? Where do we put our foot down? How many taxes are there that are out there? President Trump says it gives people more of an incentive to work.
I think the biggest incentive to work would be to bring home everything you earn.
Oh, that's right. But don't you think that the candidates, even with the conversation now, and like I said, you type into your favorite search engine the amount, the look for tax promises, and it's kind of like, well, why aren't we just talking about the fair tax? And why?
It's rather disheartening to get page after page after page of search results on that from you're looking more at Trump, and Harris has proposed a lot of tax stuff going the other direction. Kamala wants to raise the corporate tax, which is a grand plan to raise prices on everybody for everything you buy. People don't understand that. But I would love to see somebody latch on to the fair tax, and so far nobody's done that yet.
Is it a hot potato, Bob Paxton? Is it something? How do you view that?
I view it by the fact that the people who are writing the tax code, i.e. the Congress critters, are looking for any way they can to get as much money as they can for their reelection campaigns. This has just become so expensive to run for office these days. And of course, the Congress critters have to do it every 2 years. They just serve a 2-year term. So from the moment they take the oath of office, they are got their eye on raising campaign funds for next year's campaign. And one of the ways that they get a lot of money in their campaign coffers is by selling tax favors to lobbyists.
Right.
K Street, the lobbyists, we did a program a while back here on FAIRtax Radio, just looking at the sheer number of dollars that are spent on lobbying efforts, most of which, or a good chunk of which, is devoted to the tax code. So the Congress critters, and you don't have to be a Democrat or a Republican. This works on both sides of the aisle. Doesn't matter which side you're on. You need a lot of cash to get reelected. So there is a lot of bipartisan support, and you can just call that self-serving interests that Congress people on both sides of the aisle have in keeping the income tax, because that is a cash cow, if you want to use that kind of terminology, that the people on both sides of the aisle are extracting a lot of money from lobbyists. Sometimes it doesn't even have to pass. Sometimes all they want you to do is introduce a particular bill. And if you can, and the Congress critter, Steve Hayes, points this out in his chairman's reports a lot. All the Congress has to do is threaten to change the tax code, and the donations pour in from people who will be, helped by the change. They'll contribute money trying to get that change through. And those that were hurt by the change, they will contribute money to those who don't want that change to happen. So it doesn't matter what you do. Manipulating the tax code has become a very, very lucrative business in Congress, and nobody on either side wants to give that up. And we, the taxpayers, who see a much simpler, much easier, much more efficient, much less evasion prone, less error prone, less, everything wrong with the income tax. You could not design a more complicated tax system than we've got with the income tax, as illustrated with what's right over my left shoulder there. But the reason Congress won't do it is because it's not in their personal best interest, and we, the people, have got to start leaning on them.
And one of the things that we know as a truism in that is contact with our officials, our elected officials' offices, helps out greatly, because the staff that's answering the telephone, if they hear 1 or 100 or 50 or whatever that number is, that they all of a sudden start hearing those constituents call in and say, "Hey, we're interested in the tax on consumption bill, HR 25, the FAIRtax Act. Where does your boss stand on it?" As the conversation would go with the person that answered the phone in your representative's office. The more calls that go in, the more letters that are written, the more emails that are sent. Handwritten letters, in my opinion, are still very powerful because the person receiving it, that being your representative, realizes that you took a moment to sit down, locate a pen and a piece of paper, address the envelope, put the stamp on, and mail it. They realize that you've taken a moment and it's something that's significant to you.
I'm not sure they could read my writing if
you have to have good penmanship first before you do
Yes.
that. But the opportunities are there to communicate with our people that we vote for, especially here over the next few weeks as we get closer to the actual day of the election. A lot of people are being encouraged by both parties to take advantage of early voting, which is something that's new to a lot of people, especially the older generations. That, we were used to just voting on election day, and now we're going into this phase where we could go to a specific location in a window of time over several days a week, a few weeks before the election takes place, like middle of October, I think is when it starts here in North Carolina, especially here where I live, that you can vote a little earlier than election day. So you need to make sure that you go see your congressman or your senator or both and say, "I need you to support the fair tax. I'm getting ready to cast my vote in the next couple of days, and I want to make sure that you're on board," especially if they're in a tight race going forward.
Yeah. Another point that a lot of these Congress folks just never seem to recognize is that if you're going to exempt certain types of income from taxation, and then I say we went through a whole list of different types of income that are under consideration for being exempt from taxation. The other side of that coin is if you don't get that particular type of income, you don't have to make up the difference. Every time somebody gets a break, somebody that doesn't get a break gets a heavier tax burden. And that's just absolutely, totally not fair. And again, the one of the greatest beauties of the fair tax is exactly how fair it is. It treats everyone the same, regardless of how much you make, regardless of how you make your money, regardless of how much you spend. It is fair to everybody because there are not a bunch of exemptions and exclusions, and deductions and credits and whatnot, and what have you within the fair tax. It simply says if you make a retail purchase of a new product or a retail service, you pay the fair tax. You don't have to pay the fair tax on tuition expenses. You don't have to pay the fair tax on used items. But beyond that, that's it. Those are basically the only exclusions to the fair tax there are, and everybody is treated the same.
That's exactly right. And I think that's the big thing that folks are waking up to. And last week's episode with John Gaver talking about the FAIRtax calculator that he's developed for the Apple array of devices. We do have a benefit in that we can go out and show people. And I think it, again, doubling in on the grassroots efforts now, and in if you set your sights on the midterms in a couple of years from now, might be a good strategy in terms of building a grassroots push for the passage of the tax cuts, because we're going to be whoever gets in office, we're going to be challenged by the income tax, as we always are. And here around the election right now, a lot of folks are out there, saying this is good or this is bad. Depending on what publication you read, you'll find, different takes on former President Trump's tax ideas and how to. But again, as you said a minute ago, it's pointing at this group or that group over there, as opposed to something that's overall that encompasses everybody. And that's what the fair tax does in terms of tax relief.
Absolutely. HR 25 has been around for over 20 years now. It was first introduced into Congress almost 25 years. Yeah, 25 years. It was introduced in 1999. It has remained relatively unchanged. And I still can't help but remember from a couple of weeks ago when the fair tax bill itself, 131 pages, is shorter than publication 17, the instructions on how to do your income tax under the current income tax system. It takes less paper to describe the fair tax in its entirety than it does to give you the instructions on how to deal with the current income tax. So I tell you what, it's going to happen. It is going to happen. The fair tax is just too good an idea not to eventually come about. I remember we did a program, a good bit a while back, how long it took the women's suffrage movement to be successful and gain the right to vote. Over 100 years for that to happen. Hopefully it won't take that long for the fair tax, but we have just simply got to get this going, and hopefully John Gaver's fair tax calculator will help people make that point to their friends and family and what have you. And again, we encourage folks to listen to FAIRtax Power Radio, to share the videos. That helps us a lot when you do that. And of course, we've got to mention our special FAIRtax Power Radio coming up live from your radio station right there, where people see you sitting in front of your microphone, live from WTOB. The FAIRtax Guys will be on October 20th. That's a Sunday morning. I think we're still on at 8 o'clock in the morning up there. And so we will be being live on the radio station. Of course, we'll video that and play that on our regular Facebook and YouTube streams. But if you're listening to the station live that morning on October 20th, you can call in with a question about the fair tax. And hopefully we'll have the fair tax calculator on our phone. If you want to know how much fair tax does this family pay under this situation, bang, we can get it for you in 15 seconds. That'll be cool.
That's right. That's exactly right. And you may want to consider sending a question in on our social media pages, on the comment section of YouTube, and also on Rumble, that we can answer, get information for your questions and answer when Bob comes up in October 10th. It took the women's suffrage movement in the United States 100 years. The 19th Amendment to the Constitution guaranteed the rights to vote. the amendment was proposed every year for 41 years. So we're what, 20 years
We're
or so?
we're a little over halfway.
Yeah, we're not quite there, but I mean, that gives encouragement to the volunteers that are out there tirelessly working across our country for the fair tax, to be positive and know that it takes a minute for people's minds to be changed, to come around understanding. And economic situations can certainly put us on a fast track to enact HR 25 if we get to a point where we're tipping the scale over into a cataclysmic result for where our debt is right now. You will see a lot of people looking more a way to really change the economic structure of how we fund our government.
All right, let me be sure. I thought I heard you a minute ago. You say October 10th. It's going to be October 20th is when our live FAIRtax show is going to be. And of course, I will remind everyone that we will, at the end of the calendar year, be going through the tax proposal Hall of Shame, all of the nasty things that Congress wants to do to the tax code. And again, all of this goes away with the fair tax thing. Simple. What does it say on your scrolling banner now? Visible. It's visible. Efficient. There we go. I should have that. Simple, efficient, visible. That describes the fair tax to a T. So again, we certainly appreciate it if you're looking at the video, that you share the video. It is that helps us a great deal. If you share it, it is amazing the degree and the speed with which something can propagate out over social media these days. So if you just share the video with 3 or 4 folks or 3 or 4 different platforms, and folks start to catch on to the idea, and they realize and they understand that I don't have to put up with the Internal Revenue Service. I don't have to file a tax return every year. I can bring home every penny that I make. I can get a tax refund of the taxes I pay on my basic necessities every month. All that is possible. And when people realize that that's possible, you don't have to belong to a particular party or a particular political ideology. I think that's a great idea. So we need everybody we can pulling together, and we will get the fair tax done. I'm convinced we will. But one thing we will not do any more of is continue with this program, but at least on this episode of this program. The program itself will continue. We'll be back next week. But this episode is flat out of time here. We appreciate you being with us, liking and sharing the videos and commenting and all. But until we meet again, we're going to have to wrap it up. I'm Bob Paxton.
Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys. Remind you, the fair tax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
you will demand it.
So, how much will I bring home?
Go ahead.
How much do you make? We'll just say 40,000. Okay, keep it simple, throw out the deductions, all that stuff. So, you got your 40K, right? Now the first 8,000 is going to be taxed at 10%. The 8 to 33,000 is going to be taxed at 15%. And the 33 to 40, of course, is 25%. So that brings your total to $6,345.
Okay, so the average is what?
16%. Okay, and then on top of that, you got Medicare, which is 1.5%, and then of course your Social Security, which is 6.2%. So actually, your new total is $9,405.
Which is
23.65%. You're getting it. You're getting it. Don't even get me started on what the boss has to pay. He's going to pay a portion of your taxes as well, so you don't have to.
Right. And you?